So I have to admit, it didn't take until having played almost 4 out of the 7 games of the Resident Evil series to consider myself a fan. Before that, I held a great respect to this franchise. Heck, it was impossible not to. The granddaddy of the survival horror genre. What also was difficult to ignore was some of the backlash against the progression of the many games. I don't think I've ever met someone who would genuinely put the 6th installment on their favorite of the bunch. Because when a franchise goes from being slow-paced and survival-oriented to, this? One wouldn't be surprised by the anger. Many people would also mention the fact that it was the one game that I played that was the beginning of the fall, Resident Evil 5. However, as time moved on, and with it, Capcom actually getting their head out of their asses, they gained the public's favor once again with the 7th one, which not only rebooted the series to an extent, but also revitalized the love for the franchise. Yet, as previously mentioned, it wasn't until playing 4 of these games until I stood by their side. And the primary reason for doing this was because I was making my In the Mind of Leon Scott Kennedy. But at this very moment, I am working on a new analytical video focusing on another loved character from this franchise. Hence, I wanted to do a small list of my personal favorite Resident Evil games that I've played. Please keep in mind, there are many that I haven't touched yet, most of them being the spin-offs and of course, RE6. Therefore, I will begin going through all of the games that I have played in the order of playthroughs, beginning with Resident Evil 5. Oh, and remember there might be spoilers here and there.
Balls.
Well, I cannot remember when getting the game, nor why I got it. It might have been my brother buying it, actually. What I do recollect is that I absolutely loved it. Primarily because it was very action-oriented. What many fans would push up on a pedestal would be the co-op, which I didn't try out way later. So, what do I like about this game? Well, for one, it is extremely memorable with its over-the-top story while taking itself far too seriously. Honestly, watching Wesker teleport around with his shades in the middle of the night, having difficulty seeing you, is just amazing. I will say though that after having played so many of the other games in this series, this one I slowly am starting to like less and less. Having zombies using machine guns makes me just wondering why using zombies at all. I think I prefer the memes over the game itself at this point. And I can seriously say that I don't feel that I want to replay this at all. Unless if it's with a good friend. This is one of the best co-op games that I've ever played. It has some of the most fun one can have when just fooling around. The amount of times that my friend was screaming at me for accidentally shooting Jill makes me giggle in glee. Again, if you play with a friend, this thing is totally worth it. Playing alone, however, not so much. But the game that absolutely is worth going through alone is Resident Evil 7.
Alright, bring it on!
This one I have actually made a review of, and if memory serves right, I praised it to heavens beyond. Being the sole gamer with a first-person point of view does not only make it stand out more, but it also, for some, makes the experience more horrifying. At least for me. Hell, I actually find the fixed camera angles more terror-inducing than the over-the-shoulder that the current remakes are doing. The first half of the game is pure masterclass of game making, being trapped at the Baker family residence, Papa Jack skulking around while you're looking for your waifu, the family also being fantastic antagonistic figures. I will admit, Ethan, our hero, is pretty bland, even when having his hand cut off. He pretty much reacts as if he had simply forgotten his phone in the bathroom. That being said, it does help elevating the villains. Well, aside from the primary one, because as I said, while the first half is amazing, the second kind of falls off a bit, going for a bit more action-based gameplay. And with the pretty stale enemy design of the molded, it gets pretty boring after the death of the Baker parents. Yet, this being the beginning of Capcom getting better and better, this is a fantastic game, and I hope the rumors of RE8 being first-person rings true. What I'm not so hopeful for, however, is a remake of a certain other game. Resident Evil 4. Preparing myself for my Leon video, I obviously had to play this legendary piece of video game history. Resident Evil 4 might have been the true start of the action side of this franchise, but this is far from being bad. If anything, it redefined the third-person shooter genre, where it might not have that much horror. It didn't even try being scary, evidence of this being our main boy Leon.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
It's pretty difficult in talking about this game, considering the amount of individuals out there having already praised the hell out of it. I will say that when I originally was going to play it, something in the back of my mind was hoping that I wouldn't like it, as my brain sometimes wants to be a contrarian. Trust me, I hate that more than you do. That being said, this is a must play, no matter where your preferences lie. The action is glorious, the writing is some of the best I've ever witnessed, just because of how self-aware it is. Honestly, this game is probably the only one where I don't mind the escort missions, as this game is, when it's all said and done, an escort simulator. Ashley Graham might be the biggest topic when it comes to the negatives about this game, however, I myself had no issue with her. There was one time during my playthrough where I might have rolled my neck in annoyance, but that was mostly because I was playing poorly. Maybe she is horrid in the harder difficulties, but on normal, it all went smoothly. As I said, no clue on what I can add to the conversation, so all I will say is that this game probably was the one making me understand the love people have for this guy. But for me to fully understand this protagonist, I had to go a bit deeper. Resident Evil 2 Remake. The Capcom remake era has begun, and with it the RE engine being milked in full force. I personally didn't play RE2 original, which I kinda want to do these days, but the remake is something to behold. Definitely presentation-wise. This game is gorgeous, and the zombies have never looked better. Very much like RE7, this game has a fantastic first half. When exploring the Raccoon Police Department, you have full control and are in the middle of pure atmosphere, while having a tall fedora-wearing fiend stomping after you. After getting out of said station, it becomes pretty linear, but not in a horrid way. I might not be a fan of the sewer section, but I'll take that over the boat in the first-person game. What I really enjoy here, aside from the openness in the RPD, would be the characters, enemies, and the story progression. The game never feels as if it is artificially padding out its length, so the game moves as fast as you do. The idea that you can play as Leon or Claire in different scenarios are also a big plus. Sure, they play the same and they go through the same thing, but it does change up the replayability, as there are differences story-wise. Plus, I'm sure that Chris would be really happy having them so close to one another.
You want my sister? You can have her. I left everything you need together at my place. Now you just have to fuck her.
I do have some issues with some of the bosses, mainly because the gameplay mechanics doesn't feel as if they were made for having full-on 1 versus 1 combat, but it didn't make me hate the fights, more giving me a wish for better movement options, which I would eventually get in the next game. But before we can talk about that remake, we have to go into Resident Evil 3. Out of all of the classic games in this franchise, it was this game that I had the most interest in, and the answer to why that is this guy. I have no clue where this love came from for this beautiful tyrant. I loved him in Marvel so much that I was worried that I would be disappointed when finally getting my hands on the game where he came from, but when I finally got to play it, I was pleasantly surprised. But let's talk about Resident Evil 3. This is a very fast-paced experience. Oh my god, there's one mission here. Escape. There are no scenarios here. Sure, you do play as Carlos a bit, but the main mission is to get the hell out of the doomed city of raccoons. Linearity is key here. Sure, you can explore the city a bit, but the game shows you constantly exactly where you have to go. There are some puzzles here, very much like RE2, but I think I guessed myself to every answer during my playthrough. Nice first try! To be honest, there isn't that much I genuinely dislike here. The dodge mechanic feels like it only wants to work whenever it feels like it, but aside from that, I really like this game. What I also heavily enjoyed? Resident Evil HD. The game that started it all! The remake of it, at least. I honestly believed that I wouldn't enjoy this one that much, because every beginning of a series has its issues, as the developers might not fully know what they want to make. Boy, was I wrong. Maybe it has some issues in the original PlayStation 1 version, but the 2002 remake is probably one of my favorite remakes to date. It looks fantastic, it sounds great, and there's a lot of content here. Whereas almost every other game that I've talked about is fast-paced, this one right here is really slow, which isn't a negative. It always builds up to something, and just because this was the first RE doesn't mean that it was more grounded. It's not every zombie game where you face off against a massive snake.
Oh, hell no!
Yet here we are with Resident Evil HD. Differentiating itself from the other remakes by using the fixed camera angles, this version of the classic game has everything you would want from a survival horror game. tons of different enemy types, puzzles, bosses, an interesting environment, in this case being the Spencer Mansion, and a very simple yet intriguing narrative. I don't want to go too deep into this one, as I'm working on a bigger video, which will be out soon, going real in-depth into a certain character, but what I can say is that I enjoyed that there are 2 different playthroughs you can have with the different characters, and depending on some of your decisions, the story can change in small but awesome ways. What didn't change in that many awesome ways, though? Resident Evil 3 Remake. Alright, a bit too harsh of a segue, but as someone who was really excited, well, watch my review of the game. It's already out, but as a quick summary, it has the quick pacing of the original, the characters are pretty fantastic, my personal favorite depiction of Jill to date, the movement mechanics are fun to play around with, and when Nemesis is there in his full glory, it is exactly what I was hoping for. However, some of the differences did hurt a lot. The cut areas like the clock tower, the cutting down of the tyrant's part while you're exploring, the lack of puzzles, and almost no extra content. To end on a positive note, I think they nailed the soundtrack. The connection between the main heroine and hero is really good, and I will say that while I did dislike some parts of it, I absolutely feel like it is more replayable than the other remakes. I just need to mentally prepare myself for those few situations that I'm not so fond of, and one of those situations are about to come, as I'm now going to rate these games from my least favorite to the top dog. Understand that I don't hate any of these, but some of them are just better than the others. So, on the bottom of this list is Resident Evil 5. I just cannot see myself replaying this by myself. If I were to go back to this game, it would have to be with a friend. Yeah, that's pretty much the main reason. After that, we have the newest game, the remake of the 3rd installment. Again, watch my review, but overall, just disappointed with the game. I still would play it over RE5 though. What I will play over both of them, though, would be the 7th one. The beginning parts of that game are just too good. Sure, it loses some of its luster after a while, but it's still such a great experience. An even greater experience would be Resident Evil 2 Remake. Seeing Leon in his youth adventuring through his first day at work makes me really like his character, ergo the game itself. While it is lacking in the sound department, it doesn't lower the score for me that much. The game that follows would be RE3 the Spencer Mansion incident. Just a fantastically made game. It looks amazing, it sounds amazing, etc. It also has the most tragic character, in my opinion, in this entire franchise. After that, we have the game with my favorite character in this franchise, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. It might not look the best these days, but my god do I love it. The dodging mechanic might feel bad, but everything else is gold. And therefore, what is above gold? Yeah, Resident Evil 4. The most loved and overrated? I don't know if overrated, but hyped game is my personal favorite RE game. I kind of didn't want to put it here just because of, you know, its already legendary status, but when you compare all of these and look deep into them, it's hard not to choose this one. The entire playthrough of this is just perfect in almost every regard. Watch my Leon video. So yeah, that's my personal list of my favorite Resident Evil games out of the ones I've played. What about you? What would you consider to be the best RE and why? Write it down below, and I hope that you hold some excitement for my next big video. But until then, I'm KingJGrim, or the guy that has no idea on how YouTube works, whatever you prefer, and I'll see you guys next time!
George Bush will be released into the atmosphere.